At the beginning of the story, we see a man named Dan who is a car salesman, and he is very good at his work. So his boss wants to give him the Employee of the Month award. However, it is Dan and his wife's anniversary today. He starts to leave, and we see that Dan is also liked by his neighbors. He reaches his house and gives a bouquet to his wife, Jessica, who is arguing with his daughter, Nina, because she left her college and went to her boyfriend's house. She wants to go to college, but will not be able to follow her dream there, which is journalism. Dan also has a younger son, Max, and his elder son, Cale, is fond of gaming, but Dan wouldn't let him do gaming. Dan and Jessica are having fun tonight. They are going out to celebrate the anniversary, so Cale has to take care of Max. However, Cale has to go to a friend of his named Samir. So, he asks Nina to give this task, where she also agrees. After which, Cale goes to Samir's house at night. Dan and Jessica arrive at an amusement park, where they used to celebrate their anniversary every year, because they both met for the first time at this very place. When they are kissing, some boys take their picture and upload it online. Seeing this, Dan does not like it. He asks them to delete the photo where the boys disobey him and insult Dan in front of his wife, Jessica. Going back to home, Jessica says she doesn't care what they say, and she likes Dan the way he is. But Dan couldn't get over the fact that he is an idiot in the eyes of his family. Well, the next day when Jessica is taking her gymnastics classes, she meets a woman named Gwen, to whom Jessica tells about her daughter. Gwen also tells her that she is a travel agent. While doing practice, Jessica accidentally punches Gwen. Her cheek becomes completely red. She apologizes to her, and after some time, they both start drinking. Jessica starts telling her about Dan, that he is a very good husband and dad, but he doesn't like going on adventures and traveling at all. After which Gwen has to go somewhere. After which we see Dan, who is shopping with Max when he sees a strange man. But Dan ignores that man. That man suddenly attacks Dan. Looking at Dan, it seems as if he can handle him easily, where Dan, along with Max, beats that man very comfortably. But the condition of that mall gets worse. Dan says sorry, and he quickly leaves from there and quickly reaches home, where there is a secret compartment in his house in which he has put some guns and his family's passports, but all passports are expired, after which he starts packing the things. Then he calls a guy named Augie, and after listening to them, we come to know that Dan has kept a big secret from his family, and a man named McFree has been searching for Dan for many years. When those boys uploaded his photo online, McFree found out where Dan is living these days. We will know who he is later. After which Dan reaches his children's school, where he comes to know that Nina had left the editing job. She is sitting with her friends under in a stadium. Dan approaches her and asks her about Cale, who is at Samir's house. When Dan finds out, he gets very angry that Cale used to play games quietly there, but he has no time for all these things. So he puts both of them in the car and starts going home to pick up Jessica. Dan tells them that they are going to visit Las Vegas. When he tells this to Jessica, she asks him a lot of questions. Dan sees that there is a black car parked below. He somehow convinces Jessica, but when they come out, Dan sees some people in that black car who are waiting for him. A bus passes in front of them, and Dan takes advantage of it, hiding, and then they dodge them. When they leave from there and go a little distance, the car starts following them. Dan sees them and starts driving the car with high speed, which seems a bit strange to his family. Then it comes to Dan's mind that they are tracking his car. So Dan takes his car to his shop's garage and lifts it up. Seeing this, Jessica says, "Dan, what are you doing?" Dan makes the excuse that he is just checking his car so that he does not face any problem on the way. He takes out the tracker from under his car and puts it on the car of a man who is working with him and takes his family to Vegas. On the way, he sees that his family is taking some photos which they are going to upload online. But Dan will not let this happen. So he tells them that no one will use their phone during the vacation. He takes all their phones and throws them in the water outside the car. After seeing this, his family's mouths fall open because now they do not have any map. Without it, how would they know the way to Vegas? So, they go to a store on the way and buy a map and continue on their trip. Jessica and Dan are having fun singing a song, which their kids find very strange. Meanwhile, at their house, we see McFree, who is trying to track Dan's car with the help of his men. He asks his men to find Dan, and he looks very dangerous. Dan and his family is about to stay in a hotel, where Cale tells his sister that since she met her boyfriend, she has completely changed. Then, a girl arrives there who knows Cale because he is the kill boy in the gaming world, and she asks for a selfie with him. Dan is practicing in a bathroom on how to tell Jessica about his true identity, and then got their room keys from the counter of that hotel. Dan takes some cameras and goes over to them where he sees that Cale is taking selfies with that girl. When he finds out that she is going to upload the photos online, Dan lies to them, saying that in the hotel all the rooms are full and they have to leave. It is night and Dan is still driving. His family is sleeping with headphones on. Then Dan sees 3 people on a bridge who start coming after them with bikes. Seeing this, Dan plays a song in their headphones so that whatever happens next won't wake them up, and then starts speeding away in his car. He opens his window and shoots one of the bikers, where Max sees it. Seeing everything is a lot of fun for him. Then a biker climbs on their car, and Dan's gun also falls down, so he takes Max's milk bottle and pours the milk in that man's helmet and pushes him down. Then he knocks out the 3rd biker, who crashes into a billboard, the sound of which wakes up Jessica, and Dan says that there is a small pothole in the road. It turns out that Dan had driven all night, and now they have reached Iowa City. Nana becomes curious when she hears that her boyfriend's college is in the same city whom she wanted to meet. Then she starts arguing with her mom. But in the next scene, Nina wins, and they have reached her college. Jessica watches a parade of scouts in which she does a keg stand in front of everyone. Seeing this, Nina is very impressed with her mom. While they are watching the athletics there, Jessica recalls about her college days. Dan's eyes fall on a man there, who seems strange to him. So he goes towards him and Dan starts talking to him. The man tells Dan that he is from Germany and has a cornfield with samples in his suitcase. Jessica comes to call Dan, where he tells her that he will be right back soon. Dan opens the case of the man who actually had corn samples, and that man is a normal person. He is not the enemy of Dan. Suddenly, a man attacks Dan, and a fight starts between them. During this time, Dan's family is watching the labs there. The man is trying to overpower Dan, but using his abilities, Dan somehow defeats him. In the process, he destroys the lab and leaves from there. Dan tells Jessica that they should leave now. She tells him that Nina has gone to meet her boyfriend. When Nina goes to his boyfriend's room, she sees that he is cheating on her with another girl. Nina feels very bad seeing this and comes back crying. Seeing this, Dan tells her about acupressure, and Nina goes back to her boyfriend and tries the thing taught by her dad on him. Due to which he feels a lot of pain, Nina then abuses him and takes a photo of him and comes back laughing. Seeing this, Jessica gets even more impressed with Dan, after which they go back to their journey. When it's Nina's turn to drive and everyone else is sleeping, so she apologizes to her dad and says she will get back to editing and take journalism seriously, and Dan also supports her. At night, they go to a hotel. They stop there. And then the next day, Dan calls Augie, who was supposed to meet him at the area bar with his passport and new identity, and now Dan has to go to his family. Dan has to tell everything because they are about to reach the Vegas City. When Cale arrived, bursting with excitement about his Kill Boy game, Cale tells him that gaming is his whole world, and he claims to be the best. Dan, meanwhile, has been lost in thoughts about his future. His contemplation is interrupted by Cale's challenge, a laser tag match. The winner would choose an activity for the other. Both men poured their competitive spirit into the match. Dan, a seasoned pro, initially tagged Cale twice. But Cale fought back, tackling Dan. In the end, Dan's experience prevailed, leaving Cale frustrated. Dan, ever the friend, offered consolation, and their rivalry melted into a hug. Their arrival in Vegas brought jubilation. The neon lights of the city lit up their faces with joy. At their luxurious hotel, Dan ushered them into their spacious room, excitement crackling in the air. The Vegas adventure is about to begin. He leaves and meets Augie at a bar downstairs, who gives Dan his new documents and tickets for tomorrow morning's flight to Vancouver. Dan comes back to the room. With Jessica, he goes out for dinner and tells his children to stay in the room, but they are not going to listen to him. So his children goes out with Max to hang out in Vegas, and while roaming around, they reach a place, HyperX Arena, where they meet a guy named Ryan. On the other side, while having dinner, Dan tries to tell Jessica about his secret, but someone or the other disturbs them. She is so happy tonight. It is the finals at HyperX today, and Ryan sends Cale to play the game in his place. Dan and Jessica are also having fun in the casino, when Dan goes to call his children, and when no one in the room picks up his call, Dan goes back with Jessica, after which Jessica goes to fresh up, and while Dan is watching the scene outside, two people start firing at him. Dan kills both of them, but one man grabs Jessica, makes her a hostage. Seeing this, Dan puts down his gun. The man says that he will kill both of you, and after killing both of you, he will also kill their children who are in the HyperX. Here Dan made a trick with his knife and kills that guy. Later, both of them start going towards HyperX. They take their children with them and start going from there. Dan tells them that he used to be an assassin, and now the people who worked with him in the past are after him to kill. Hearing this, Cale and Nina start laughing at him. After a while, a woman opens fire on them. And seeing this, Dan takes out his gun and takes cover of a car and shoots that lady and starts leaving from there. But that woman has worn a bulletproof jacket. She stands up and starts following them again. But this time Dan kills her and takes his family from there. They go to a hotel, and here Dan tells them everything, that earlier his name is Sean, and he used to work in the military, where one day a man named McFree took Dan with him. And then Dan started doing bad things with him, which everyone would avoid. One day he met Jessica, and he left that work. Now the same people are after him, and they will have to move to another city with a new identity. Hearing this, his children get very angry and leave from there by throwing away their passports, and Jessica also could not believe that Dan kept such a big thing as a secret from her for so many years. She says that tomorrow morning she will take the children and leave from there, and goes inside and calls her travel agent friend Gwen to go back home. Dan remains sitting outside there the whole night. In the morning when they are leaving, Dan tries to explain to them. He tries, but they don't listen to him and leave from there. When they reach the airport, Gwen had brought a whole private jet for them, which they find a bit strange, but when they go inside that plane, they see that McFree is present there. In the next scene, McFree calls Dan, shows him his family, and invites him to a casino named Paso Eden. Dan quickly reaches there, and some people come to pick him up. Dan is brought up by a bald man in an elevator, and here from the conversation between McFree and Dan, we come to know that both of them are father and son. Whereupon hearing this, Dan's family also starts thinking, well, McFree wants Dan back with him. McFree wants to get the job done, and if Dan does so, McFree will leave his family safe and sound. But if he does not do so, he will be forced to kill his grandson and granddaughter. After this, Dan had no other option, so he agreed. After this, that bald guy starts taking his family, where Nina explains to her mom that they have to help Dad, no matter what is their identity. Dan is their family. While they are going in the elevator, Max spoils his diaper, and Jessica takes it out and puts it in that guy's mouth and throws him down. Then she takes his gun and starts going over to Dan, who is sitting in a chair, and Gwen is on top of him. While she is having fun, McFree comes down. Dan is also supporting her. His family also reaches there, and seeing the opportunity, Dan makes Gwen unconscious. Then he comes to his family and apologizes to Jessica. Downstairs, McFree calls Gwen, and when she doesn't pick up, he figures out the whole thing. Upstairs, Cale takes a man's drone, and Dan sees that McFree's men are closing in on him, where he tells his family to go to the rooftop to hide. One last time, he must assume his old form, with Killboy helping him. His family takes the elevator to the rooftop. McFree watches that elevator is coming down, which is completely empty. When his people look inside, there is a bomb in it, which gets blasted. After which, Dan appears in front of them, and Cale uses that drone to tell him the positions of the enemies. Guesses who is attacking from where, and Dan starts killing them. Meanwhile, Gwen also regains consciousness, and McFree tells her to go to Cale, who had the drone, and Gwen goes up with full confidence. Seeing that elevator coming up, Jessica hides her children under a table and stands, pointing that gun towards that elevator. As soon as the door opens, Jessica fires all the bullets from that gun, but Gwen hides herself, and when the gun is empty, she comes out of the elevator. Downstairs, Dan is overpowering them all alone with the help of Cale. But upstairs, Gwen is overpowering Jessica. Nina starts going there to help her, but before that, Gwen puts a big ceiling over Jessica and then starts going to her children. McFree destroys that drone and starts moving towards Dan. Jessica uses all her might and comes after Gwen, but she throws her down. Dan also takes bullets out of McFree's gun and starts to fight with him. Jessica, using a bamboo pole, tries to get to his kids. She tries, but it breaks, but she doesn't give up. When she throws the same broken bamboo towards Gwen, it goes straight into her chest, and she falls to the roof ground. McCaffrey points the gun towards Dan. Then his family comes there, and Nina engages him in conversation. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Dan makes her unconscious, and then they all come out together where the police had come. After which we flash forward to 6 months later, where we see that Nina has done her first journalism on her grandfather McFree by exposing him. Dan has opened a security company. Jessica has started work as a sports teacher in a school, and Cale is also continuing his gaming. In the last scene, we see them dropping Nina at her college in a big family van. With this scene, the story ends here. So do tell me by commenting how you like this film. I will meet you in the next video.